Welcome to the Ringer Fantasy Football Show. My name is Danny Heifetz, and I'm joined by Danny Kelly and Craig Horlbeck. And today, we're doing our New Year's resolutions for next year, a.k.a. the Memento tattoos of things we're going to tattoo on our bodies so we don't forget. Because, Craig, as you always note, we learn all these lessons at the end of each fantasy season, each real NFL season, and then we immediately forget them and then go into next season and we don't remember anything we wanted to remember for next year.
Yep, we get fantasy amnesia every year. It happens to the best of us. And then you're in an auction draft or you're in a snake draft, and then you get deer in the headlights and you make a rash decision that ruins your entire season. But with these tattoos, I guess you'd have to draft shirtless then to see all the tattoos on your body. Maybe you should do that. But that's what we're doing today, and we will revisit these again in the summer.
DK, will you explain Memento? First of all, if you haven't seen Memento, it doesn't matter. DK, want to give people it's basically an amnesiac guy who tattoos stuff he needs to remember on his body.
Full disclosure, I have not seen the movie, or at least I don't remember seeing it.
I always forget that.
No, it's been so long, I actually don't remember. I have
amnesia. Yeah.
We should that should be the first two. The first tattoos, DK has not seen Memento.
Yeah. Christopher Nolan really is, he directed that movie. He really is kind of the director of this podcast. I feel like Christopher Nolan kind of weaves his way in and out of this show with Oppenheimer. I feel like there's Interstellar. I feel like it's come up a few times. Yeah, Memento.
Anyway, the point is the plot is basically this guy is trying to figure out something, who's trying to kill him or whatever, but he has short-term amnesia, doesn't remember anything, so he starts tattooing things on his body. He reads the tattoos in the mirror, figures out who he needs to talk to, blah, blah, blah. I'm obviously probably leaving out a huge amount of detail, but that's the basic gist of it. Take these tattoos into your draft and pay attention to them.
And the movie is told in reverse chronological order. The first scene is the last scene, and then every scene is the scene before.
That sounds tiring.
But not to get too particular about it. Anyway, question for you guys. This is an organic question right now. Speaking of things we forgot about, we did this episode a couple years ago where we actually did the show backward like Memento, and then we did the intro. We put this at the end. And then the beginning of the show was emails, and then we did the lessons in the middle. Should we do that again?
I don't know if that played.
I don't know either. I don't know if it played.
That was in our experimental phase.
The reverse chronological thing worked in the movie. I don't know if it with a podcast.
We tried.
We're not Christopher Nolan.
Okay. All right. So we could just get to the Memento.
We gotta, throw up some shots and see what hits.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll just do the whole thing in order then. Fine. Okay. So we're going to go through it again. We do mean this as like New Year's resolutions, but it really is like half of fantasies. You show up and you're kind of like, what happened last year? And that really is the goal of this, is trying to remember, capture this moment in a bottle of like how we feel at the end of the season and being like, what do you want to change going forward, and actually be able to remember it. So starting with, we each have a bunch of rules here. It's not really power hour style. It's more like just a list of things that we're not going to put a clock on or anything.
Yeah.
And we have seen each other's stuff. And I want to start number one. Craig, you have a giant tattoo right across your back, and it just says, take the guys you want.
Yeah, it was on my back last year, and then I didn't do that in my drafts over the summer. So now
didn't bring a mirror.
I'm going to get a second one. I'm going to put it across my chest because I forgot about it. Yeah, this sounds oversimplified, but so basically, I'll give a quick example. So I'm in only two fantasy leagues. One with my high school
minimalist.
Friends, one with my college friends. That's it. That's how I like it. I'm also in a dynasty league with you two fellas. But so these two leagues, the high school one, a little bit higher stakes, more money. We've been playing for a little bit longer. So in terms of the priority, I guess if I could pick to win one, it would be that one. What's funny about that is the other league, the college league, which slightly lower stakes, still a large financial investment, whatever. I'm always better in that league. And the reason why I've realized is that I get way too cute in the high school league, and I try to become Mr. Value. And I'm always pivoting to save $1 here and there. And in my college league, you know what? I make a list of the 20 guys I want. I don't care how much they cost, and I draft them. And it usually works out. In my high school league, Michael Pittman was $10 cheaper than he should have been, so I drafted him. Breece Hall was $8 cheaper than he should have been, so I drafted him. I did not have those guys on my top targets list. I didn't talk about them once in the offseason with you two. If you're going to do all the prep, if you're somebody who loves to get into the weeds, and build your own rankings and do tiers and do all this stuff, and you have your guys that you feel so confident about, and then you get into the draft day and Jaden Reed is $10 cheaper, and you take him and throw off your entire strategy, it is not worth it. Don't do it. Take the guys you want.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. I think in the early days of our fantasy analysis, especially for auction leagues, I would have been like, yeah, look for value. If you see a guy, they're not paying attention, grab him up or whatever. I think I would just completely change my opinion on that and change my advice on that. Don't ever take anybody you don't really want, even for $1, because you could use that dollar for a player you really want. And at the end of the draft, every dollar does matter when you're kind of like, especially like the last like 50 picks or whatever of like people that are throwing out $1 and $2 bids. If you have that extra dollar, you can get the guy that you're really waiting for that has like that you actually think is a really good value instead of just, looking at ADP and being, oh, whatever, like this guy's valued at $50, but he's 40. And now I've got this guy I didn't really want, and I spent $40 on him or whatever. Even though it's a good value, that usually I think is not going to pay off for you. And so I totally agree with this. The auction league that I'm in, this is exactly what I did this season, and it was my best season in that league so far. And it was basically like I had a very short list of guys I wanted, and I had like a very specific dollar range I was willing to spend on these guys. And I really stuck to that for the first time ever in this league. And it like worked out really well. Like my team was really good. So that was my big lesson this year is just like be really, really specific in auction leagues.
I also wonder if this is a product of me getting a little bit older. And I'm like, you know what? Pay for the shit you want.
I like what I like.
Yeah, I like what I like. It's easier? Pay for the valet. It's $10. Pay for the valet.
You don't have to drive around.
It'll make your night 30% better, honestly, than you getting pissed before dinner because you're circling the block 8 times. Pay 10 extra bucks, get the parking spot you want, draft the running back you want.
It's kind of like movers, right? Like when you're 20 and you're moving, your friends will help. And when you're 30, it's like, just get movers.
Right? Yeah, 100%.
You age out of certain things. I think, but this is very similar to my number one rule for myself going into next season. And this is going to be like on my forehead, like a 21 Savage style. So right on my, knife on my face. And it just says Marie Kondo was right. And I don't know if you guys remember Marie Kondo, but remember she got big during COVID when everyone's living at home and everyone's like rearranging their house. And it's like, I have too much stuff. How do I get rid of my stuff? And Marie Kondo had this like revolutionary thing that was like, does it spark joy? No? Get rid of it. And you're like, if you don't like your stuff, why do you have it? And I shout out to my my friend Brian, who
Brian.
Brian, he had on his roster in like a juggernaut team. He's one of the 2 best in the keeper league, and it was like amazing player, amazing player, amazing player, amazing player. And at the end of this bench, he had Ricky Parasol, and I was like, "Why do you have Ricky Parasol on your team?" And he's like, "I like him. It makes me happy." And I was like, why have I strayed so far from just having players you like on your fucking fantasy football team? He was like, he got shot. I like that he came back. I like that he brought the people who saved him to the game. Seems like a good guy. And I was like, you know what? Brian won his league. And I am trying to get back to that of like, basically, I look across this and I'm like, it's fantasy football. You should have players that you like watching. And I think that, frankly, this is something I think I've been trying to say for like the 5-6 years doing the show, and that I don't think I've articulated as well until Brian said this to me of like, I want players to spark joy, where it's like fantasy football analysis to me is like way too math oriented, where it's like target share and breaking down offenses and yards per route run. And like, I would like to next year get back to, you know what? Do you like watching this guy play football? Do you like watching his team? Do you like his story? Do you like following him on Instagram? Like, that also matters. And I'm not saying the rankings should just be vibes, but the vibes are more than a tiebreaker. And I want more players I like watching play football next year.
I like it.
This ties perfectly with my next tattoo, which is avoid anybody who skipped minicamp to see if the aliens built the pyramids.
Who could that be?
I'm so upset with myself. My whole philosophy heading into the 2024 season was like to avoid variance. It was like try to be as safe as possible. Basically, the Amon-Ra St. Brown model. It's like you can't go broke making a profit. Amon-Ra St. Brown, no matter what, you will be happy you took Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's a great example of your tattoo hype. It's like I love that guy. He's a great story. He seems awesome. I like watching the Lions. Like I don't know why I don't just take him every year.
Yeah,
me for some reason. Seeing that Breece Hall was going for fucking whatever, $8 cheaper than he should have, and throwing out everything else about the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and Woody Johnson and the Achilles and all this crap, and me taking Breece Hall made me so upset, as you guys followed along throughout the entire season. It also led to me realizing that Breece Hall's not any good. So maybe that was a positive and saved me in the long term. But yeah, there are certain characters that I only want to watch from afar. I don't want to be right next to them on the bus. And Aaron Rodgers is one of them.
100%. I mean, just honestly avoiding. DK said this to us years ago, Craig. This was another. Every now and then, DK drops wisdom on us, where I'm like, DK is much wiser.
Every
than us.
now and then. Thank you. Backhanded compliment.
Broken clock of wisdom.
He's just so old. Sometimes he says some things.
Sometimes you stumble into something smart. You're getting your words turned around.
My grandfather used to give us little sayings, the little pieces of paper he wrote down and say it was ancient wisdom. And DK, maybe you can start doing that. Just write down things, quotes on paper. We were talking about Michael Thomas a couple years ago. And you're like, I don't have the energy for this guy. You were just like, I'm done. I'm done with Michael Thomas. I don't want this person in my life. I've been there, done that. He's done. And I'm like, that's an important thing as you get older. If like more fountains in your life and get rid of the drains. You don't want people draining your energy. No one's got time for that. And that's what I'm doing. Yeah. Again, I'm not saying I would never draft Kyle Pitts ever again. I just don't want to seek hanging out with Kyle Pitts. Like the less time, it's like Aaron Rodgers, Kyle Pitts, Jalen Waddle. If I have them on my team next year, either I failed or they fell 4 rounds and I was like, whatever. But like, you know what?
Don't do it.
They're small dose friends, and fantasy football is a big dose activity. Kyle Pitts, I don't know if I want, you know what I mean? I think just avoiding those kinds of people.
Like a big part of fantasy is you're ceding control to these people. These in our world, these random people that we don't know that are playing a sport at the highest level have a weird amount of control over our happiness and our sadness. You know what I mean? Like from our real teams to our fantasy teams, and this is a good way to hedge with each other. But like, I see it as like you can control what you can control. The best way to avoid the super lows of all this is to just like control who you're putting on your team. This person's not going to make me feel shitty about myself, like by picking him. I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't want to be on that ride.
I know this sounds like dumb analysis, but if you think about it at the end of the day, why have I ever signed up to root for the Bears, the Jets, or the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah.
Like all those teams, all those guys need to be, I'm serious. I am resolving. I want to blindly move all of those players down 1 to 2 rounds because then you have to watch the Jets or the Bears or the Browns. That's not how I want to spend my free time. And it's just, they're bad teams. And also this is I'm not trying to blame anyone. But like, this is like not the same thing as like toxic people. I don't want to watch the Dolphins, man. Sorry to Carlos, but like Tua, every time he gets tackled, I'm like a little afraid. Chris Olave next year, he's had like 6 concussions. I can't watch Chris Olave, and every time he gets tackled, I'm like, oh no, he's going to get another concussion. And like, how will that impact me? And like, you know what? I don't want to feel that way anymore. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway, yeah. So just who are you spending time with?
Who else? Does that go right into mine?
Yeah.
This is an old rule. We wrote this rule like 4 years ago. I can't even remember how old this rule is. It's been on my body. It's starting to fade. Some of my other tattoos are bleeding into it. But it just says this. 4 words. Don't trust Kyle Shanahan. I'm pretty sure the start of this was the Brandon Ayuk doghouse situation where we were super excited about Brandon Ayuk coming into the year, and then he didn't really play for like the whole first half of the season. And we're like, I'm fucking sick of this. I don't want to have to deal with Kyle Shanahan anymore. But basically, this has happened every year. There was this one-off year where Christian McCaffrey did a lot of really good things, and this didn't make any sense. But full circle, we came back to it. There were about 30 minutes before week 1's game, Monday Night Football game. We found out that Christian McCaffrey has an Achilles injury or 2 Achilles injuries, and he ended up not playing. Only one at the time. It spread to the other one. Yeah.
2 Achilles.
And Christian McCaffrey ended up scoring fewer points this season than Dario Gumbawale.
Oh. You didn't have to do that. That was an extra twisting
just
the knife.
Throwing that name out there. Dario Gumbawale scored more points than Christian McCaffrey, who was the number 1 overall pick in a lot of people's drafts.
I don't think an NFL team I've ever noticed has abused the injury report rules more than the Niners did this year.
Yeah, they straight up just lie about it. I didn't know you were allowed to do that.
Yeah, like they're stricter
lying
now.
Greater than.
Lying's awesome. Like the other one that went under the radar was Deebo Samuel being pulled from a game because he had fluid in his lungs, but then like he wasn't on. He
had pneumonia.
He had pneumonia. He just
was in the fucking hospital. This is, and I think like. True, like we're laughing, haha, this is funny, but like actually the 49ers, I think, are one team in particular that really pride themselves on keeping everything in-house, not letting anything get out. That's why no one in the industry, 0 people, knew that this Christian McCaffrey thing was like as serious as it was supposed to be. we like Heifetz. I think you were like, in Craig, you did this too. You guys were like the most worried about it than anyone I saw. And I was like, I didn't see anybody reporting that he was going to miss significant time. You know what I mean? And so I was just like, I got to go with the reporting. And I can't do that with this team because they're so good at keeping everything internal. They're keeping everything in-house. I can't believe the CMC thing didn't come out before it did.
Do you remember Jordan Mason? He had never had 30 carries in his life. And in that week 1 game, he had 30 carries. He had like 100 and something yards. He was great. And then he got to do the post-game interview for NBC or ESPN. And he goes on and they're like, when did you know you would start? And he was like, oh yeah, Friday. They told me Friday.
And then he's like, I fucked up.
And that's on television. Then he goes to his post-game press conference after the best game of his entire life. And he's like, I'm so sorry I let my team down. Like, clearly just got screamed at by someone.
Code red.
Kyle Shanahan or someone else. And he was so sad that he had, like, created a controversy. But
to me, that is why I don't want to have to rely on the 49ers going forward.
The Niners right now, heading into 25, are a really bizarre team for fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't think of a more talented roster of players that I don't want anything to do with. It's like we have now kind of like later prime Deebo Samuel. You have Brandon Ayuk coming off an ACL. You have whatever the hell's going on with Christian McCaffrey's legs. You got Brock Purdy after a down year. George Kittle's now 31 years old. And yet, if you just like kind of say all those names and think about them for 5 seconds, you're like, wow, what a roster, what a great team. I don't know if I want any of those guys next year.
It's a headache.
I just goes back to Heifetz's Spark Joy thing. I just they stress me out. I don't want to have to deal with this roller coaster.
It's so funny though, because they were like the best, coolest, most fun. They were the Lions 3 years ago, where it was like you grab any Niner and you're having a blast.
We're leaving out a big part though. DK, you're a Seahawks fan. You hate this team. I think that's also part of it. Don't have. You already hate the 49ers anyway. It's like, you know what? You don't have to have them.
I don't have to pick any of these guys. In fact,
you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, Daniel.
No, you have to do anything.
Speaking of that, I have another one. I'm just going to rattle off a few here.
And this is your shit list, essentially.
This is really just I'm freeing myself from the yoke of Sean Payton next year. I don't want to shackle myself to the whims of Sean Payton, who he decides to play, who he decides to feature on any given day. I don't want to have to care or think about who he wants to play in any specific week.
And maybe you'll appreciate him more because then you can just sit back and watch the Broncos, and if they're good, you can marvel at his choices.
This is not me saying that he's a bad coach. This is me saying he's fucking annoying from a fantasy point of view. He used to not be this bad because in the days of when they had the 2 running backs, those guys would always produce. It was like Mark Ingram and Kamara and whoever else they had during that period. They would always produce at high levels. This year, their best running back was Javonte Williams, who was like absolutely useless. He averaged 7.6 points per game in half PPR. Like if you were, it's like fucking whack-a-mole week in and week out, trying to figure out who he's going to play, whether it's McLaughlin or Estime or whoever. Here's the snap rates. Javonte Williams played 53% of the snaps. The next closest, 28%, 16%, 15%, 11%. He's just sprinkling in guys for fun. And the same could be said about his receivers. Cortland Sutton, he had a decent year. I think he had a worse year than I remember. He was like good at times, but he ended up being the wide receiver 29.
Well, Sutton was really bad for 5 weeks.
Right.
Then he was like really, 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 really good for 6 or 7 weeks, and then he was kind of bad again.
And then, so he ended up playing 86% of the team's snaps. No other receiver on the team played more than 58% of the snaps. Just sprinkling it in, little Jordan Humphrey. You know, we saw a little bit of Troy Franklin. We saw a little bit of Marvin Mims. Again, it's whack-a-mole. I don't know when to play these guys. I don't want to have to think about this offense. Bo Nix is the only player I'm going to even think about in fantasy next year. And I just want to remember that and remind myself to not get sucked in to training camp reports about Marvin Mims doing something, because he's going to end up being like 5th on the depth chart next year again. I don't care. I don't want to deal with it. I'm done with Sean Payton. I'm done with this team. Bo Nix is cool. That's it.
Fuck you.
You're
fuck
cool.
You, you're cool.
Yeah. I quit. Fuck you. Fuck you. Bo Nix, you're cool. I'm out.
Craig, do you have any other people you're just out like on your shit list?
Oh God. I mean, irrationally, yes. I mean, there are quarterbacks. I think I'm actually too reactionary to I'm going to be out on CJ Stroud. I don't care what you tell me next year. I won't draft him. I just won't.
Craig holds funny grudges on players.
See, the problem is if you draft guys that you like, that you think will make you happy, people like Amon-Ra St. Brown. If I draft Amon-Ra next year and he has a terrible season, I'll fucking hate him, and I don't want to hate him. But I can't help it. So it's almost fun to draft. Keep your enemies close, because then if they disappoint you, you can continue hating them.
It's just more reliable than Stroud. like
CJ
winning your odds
Stroud.
are really low, but your odds of losing and hitting someone are really high. DK, what's your next tattoo?
Where is the tattoo?
Where's my next tattoo? This one's
where
gonna
is it
be
on your body?
This is gonna be like on my forearm. I see, or like my hand. I see it every day.
The back of your hand, like on your knuckles.
Yeah, it's like the hold fast that the sailors do. I'm gonna like put in really small ink on my knuckles.
I didn't know sailors did that.
Do sailors do that?
Yeah, sailors
Knuckle
out
tattoos?
here. Sailors do tattoos, yes.
They do hold fast on their hands. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
It's
Hold
like an old
fast.
classic one. I don't know if it's like whatever.
Did you
It's
say
from the
neoclassic?
movies?
Old. He said old.
You know,
class.
Master and Commander, the old
I've
fart.
never seen
That's like
it.
the guy that I don't know if you saw that. It's a great movie. Anyway, this is going to be again. It sounds simple, but I find that I make this mistake, and a lot of people make this mistake every year. Going in, you talk yourself into teams that are players on teams, or you talk yourself out of players that are very clearly and obviously going to be awesome. And Saquon Barkley is I think like the main character in this rule. Draft elite players who are on elite offenses. Saquon Barkley, elite athlete, elite player, one of the most explosive and elusive runners I've ever seen in my life, went to the team with the best offensive line in the NFL by far. And we were like, well, what's his target rate going to be? Is Jalen Hurts going to steal his touchdowns? It's like, we overthink this. It's analysis paralysis. Take elite players on elite offenses. I don't want to overthink this again next year. I'm just going to like block out the noise, block out like all the different things that are kind of like trying to convince me that Saquon Barkley behind the Eagles offensive line is not going to be good.
Yeah, I think we were higher on. I think we did this with Derrick Henry, Saquon. Like I think it's related where, if anything, I think our first draft rankings we were really high on them, and then we saw that we were like way higher than everybody else.
That's what always happens. It's almost your first instinct. It's almost like I wish I could just like I've actually started making my 2025 rankings right now, and I should just stick with those now because how I feel now is uninfluenced by any outside information. It's just like my gut, what I feel. And I do think I'm sure by June, July, August, I'll start to read stuff and it'll affect my biases and it'll make me question myself. And then I'll end up not doing what I originally felt in my gut. But yeah, Derrick Henry, it was like, Derrick Henry going from the team that had the lowest yards before contact in the league to the team with the best yards before contact in the league.
Yeah.
You could just stop there and you're like, all right.
Yep. And we should have stopped
played
there.
out.
And like, I think that's the thing is sometimes we weigh things like it's pros and cons instead of calibrating. But how much do these things weigh? Derrick Henry going from last in yards for the worst blocking team to the best blocking team.
Good for God, he was on the Titans last year.
That's all you needed to say. That weighs more than the other concerns. And so I think to me, this version of this is not just, take elite players. The way I look at this is like, if I got this tattooed, it's like skate to where the puck is heading. And so I think looking at this past season, what I wish we had weighed more, and I actually think we did a good job of this, but it's like, people are like, oh, older running backs, whatever. But here's the thing. Teams were paying them. The Ravens paid Derrick Henry.
Follow the money.
Eagles follow the money. And here's the thing. Because all the analytical arguments, you weren't going where the puck is heading because everyone's like, oh, well, older running backs, that's a concern, blah, blah, blah. The sharpest, most analytically oriented teams targeted veteran running backs. The Vikings signed Aaron Jones. The GM of the Vikings is a very analytic person. The Eagles went and got Saquon. The Ravens went and got Derrick Henry. They paid Derrick Henry $16 million a year. Like, that should tell you something. And so, but applying that going forward, I'm a little afraid. And I think the thing to remember, and again, where's the puck going next year? I think most people, frankly, are going to see this year and see Saquon and Derrick Henry, and any discount on older running backs is over. And in reality, I think the actual thing to remember for next season is we should not over-index on what I think is the healthiest running back season of our entire life. Like, if you just look at the top 20 running backs, 15 of them, like, played the first 15 weeks of the season. Like, that never happens. You know what I mean? And so, looking at it, I actually think, whereas 30 of the top 40 receivers you took were either hurt for a month or awful for a month, that won't repeat. It's like, I won't go through the whole list again, but like 25 of the first 40 receivers missed like 6 weeks. I just think that is probably likely to swing back. And so I think that there is probably an advantage that we had not over-indexing. I'm like, oh, that means I have to go get like all the older running backs. In reality, they're all going to move up 2 to 3 rounds from where maybe they would have been last year. and the receivers are going to move back. And it's like the running backs aren't going to just automatically be healthy again.
Yeah, this was one of my tattoos. I don't know where it is. It's probably like a rib cage. Those are always cool.
Oh, nice.
I feel like that would hurt the most.
Yeah, I think those are painful.
That's because I really wanted to remind
so you
myself.
remember it.
Yeah. It's basically buy low on elite wide receivers again. This was such a weird year. I went through the last 10 years of basically top 10 wide receiver health. And this year, the top 10 wide receivers in points per game in fantasy played 129 games. And that is the lowest in the last 10 years. Last year, it was 153, 141, 153, 148. They played 129 this year. So very, very bizarre year. Also, there was a lot of guys who performed well on bad teams, which also doesn't traditionally happen. Guys like Brian Thomas was the top 5 wide receiver. Jackson Smith and Jigba, not saying that the Seahawks are a bad team, but there were Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson. There was a lot of guys who actually finished inside the top 10 who were on teams with either bad quarterbacks or they were on teams that didn't make the playoffs. Very bizarre year, very unhealthy year for wide receivers, extremely healthy year for running backs. Like I said, the top 10 wide receivers played 129 games. The top 10 running backs played 138. I mean, you're not going to find that very often where the running backs are playing more. So I do think there will be a bit of a pivot where I'm sure a lot of these running backs are going to go a lot higher. I still think obviously Saquon probably should be the number 1 or number 2 pick in drafts next year, but like I do think there is some value on all those elite wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on that note, I do think that I have no problem with Saquon being the first pick. I do think an early thing, just reading the tea leaves of what are people going to think when they're going to next year's draft. And like, I want the safety of, there's 3 or 4 great receivers, Jamar Chase, Jefferson, I don't have to list them all, but like, and after that, you're like, I want good running backs. I wish I had Saquon last year. I want Derrick Henry, blah, 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 blah. And part of me thinks, I think the values are twofold. One, I want to take the lesson of like, I look at like Bucky Irving from the Buccaneers. And I think frankly, if guys produce as a later round pick, there's a gap between when we see them being good and when we will all acknowledge how good they are, because we're afraid that they're going to be we're very anchored to the pre-draft stuff. And I think of it as like Malik Neighbors had 2 weeks into the season, like in an 8-day span, he played great. And we're like, Malik Neighbors, elite receiver, like 10 days into his career. Amon-Ra St. Brown had to play like 12 games as a top 6 receiver, like really a year passed until we were like, he's the top 12 receiver. And I know stylistically in real life, they're not the same player, but like there's such a big gap if you were drafted in real life later till we accept that you're a fantasy asset. And I'm like, I want to trust my eyes with Bucky Irving. You know what I mean? And like, you look at Joe Mixon, he's going to get cut by the Bengals. And I'm like, Joe Mixon is as good as some of these guys. And this season didn't end well, but I think there's trying to take those things at face value. Kyron Williams, we didn't want to believe that was real for a while, even entering this season. And I'm like, Sean McVay trusts him. I think that there's advantages in just trusting your eyes with like a Chuba Hubbard, Bucky Irving, those guys who I saw they were good. They did produce, but there just will be a value gap next year. And I think those guys will be better values than like, frankly, like James Conner.
It's kind of like how they say, if you stay at the same company for a long time, your boss will only see you as your first title. It's like if you're an assistant and you rose up, they kind of will always see you as an assistant. And it's kind of the way it's like, if you're a late round draft pick, you will always be viewed as it's really, really difficult to actually pierce through and join that elite tier.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a great one. I think guys like Chuba Hubbard, Bucky Irving are probably all going to go for less than they should if they were Bijan Robinson taken in the first 10 picks.
While we're on running back strategy, there's one other thing I want to throw by you guys. I think something that I want to remember for next year. I think all these rookie running backs who did nothing are going to be the best ROI players you could take next year. Like if you do a fantasy draft, I would love next year. If I could do a fantasy auction right now, I would get all stars at every other position, take one great running back, and just take 5 or 6 dart throw $1 running backs on the guys who did nothing this year. Blake Corum, Trey Benson for the Cardinals, Kamani Vidal for the Chargers, Audric Estime for the Broncos, because I think about Kyron Williams, who did nothing as a rookie, and then year 2. And you know why? I think it is harder for rookie running backs to get on the field than maybe ever in the NFL, maybe at least in modern times, because of how complicated defenses are blitzing and all this crazy stuff you see at the line of scrimmage now, where it's like there's 6 guys, you know what I mean? It's like you have 2 linebackers in the A gap, and the whole thing is we're going to send 4. You don't know which 4. And like the entire point is to trick one of the 6 people blocking, the 5 linemen, the rookie running back. If the rookie running back's there, everything Brian Flores is doing on defense is to trick like Trey Benson Like, that's the point. They want Trey Benson to think, oh, no one's coming up from the middle because you go inside out. No one's coming up the A-gap. I'm going to look left. Oh, someone is coming up the A-gap. They're trying to trick you. And frankly, I think offenses don't trust the rookies. Like, I think you used to be able to get on the field block September, October. Now they're like, you're going to do that in year 2, buddy. You don't know how to do this right now. We're not throwing you against Steve Spagnuolo and Brian Flores. And I think
get ready to learn year 2, pal.
Yeah. So, like, I look at Tank Bigsby. DK, was Tank Bigsby not one of the worst rookie running backs last year?
Dude, he had an all-time terrible first season. It was hilarious. Like, it was actually hilarious how bad he was, because there was people that were definitely really excited about him. There was talk in the preseason that he was going to split carries with ETN, and then he was the worst running back I've ever seen in my life. He had like 3 out of 4 of his like targets were interceptions off his hands or something like that. It was just like, it was almost a parody or whatever.
Even
but then
take a guy like Chase Brown, who everybody said was such a horrific pass blocker last year, which maybe he was, but as we see, 1 year goes by, he's playing a lot more, and he was actually just as good now as Joe Mixon was as a pass blocker for Cincinnati.
In February of last year, Chase Brown was prepping to run a 40-yard dash and running 3-cone drills for the combine. And in February of this year, he will be on vacation with Joe Burrow talking through blitz protections. And like, that is the difference. So like, all that's to say, the guys who there's nothing to go off of, Blake Corum, Benson, Vidal, Estime, all those guys, the perfect $1 players. One of them's going to pop. You know what I mean? So anyway.
I like that.
The next one here, and again, I think this is similar to what DK, you were just saying about elite players. Take elite players, don't overthink it. This tattoo is right across my chest, and it just says, Joe Burrow killed my family. I think, I know I've said this a lot this season, but I think that this season as a percentage, I got more of my predictions about players and player takes right at a percentage better than any season I've ever actually done. Like, I got some stuff right, like Jaden Daniels. But the reality of fantasy football is there's about 15 players that double your odds of making the championship. And there's between 3 and 5 players that like triple or quadruple your odds. And I was wrong. I was probably the most wrong person who does fantasy for a living about Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I was like literally the most wrong. And it turns out the best thing you could have done this season was stack Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins at quarterback receiver, and then just take running backs. So basically the opposite of what I said. And I feel bad because I probably cost people some money in some leagues by steering people away from Joe Burrow and Chase. And I actually feel worse about Chase than Burrow.
Just quick interlude here. Burrow is the number 3 quarterback in fantasy. Chase is number 1 receiver in points per game, and T. Higgins is the number 2 receiver in points per game.
It's tough because, like, I think the same logic. I know it's fuck me, but like, it's tough because the same logic. We were the only
number 1 and number 2.
Has that ever happened?
I don't know.
Waddle and Tyreek didn't do that, right?
I think the year that 2019 Bucks when Jameis did 30 and 30, it was like Jameis was high, and then Godwin and Evans were both top 5 receivers.
They were 1 and, but not 1 and 2, right?
I don't think so.
1 and 2 is pretty crazy.
Like we talk about like top 10 guys or 2 top 12 guys, 2 wide receiver ones. Like,
what was you're saying, DK? You're saying T. Higgins was the what?
He was number 2 in points per game.
Literally right now in half PPR, Jamar Chase is number 1 in points per game. T. Higgins is number 2 in points per game. He missed 5 games, so this is like obviously not total points, but on a per game basis, it's Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson, Godwin, Amon-Ra, Puka, Nico, Mike Evans.
And it's like it required like the Bengals defense collapsing in addition to, and here's the worst part of this is that it's not that Joe Burrow's wrist injury didn't exist. It was a concern for him and he just got over it and was fine. I think it violates a few rules we've already talked about of like, don't bet against elite players. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, don't bet against Saquon, don't bet against the Joe Burrow. And the other thing I think that I regret about the Joe Burrow thing is that the Marie Kondo rule I was talking about, sparking joy. I love Joe Burrow and I love Jamar Chase. And it wasn't like fun to go out there. And I do think it was an underrated storyline. He got over it, but I do think the first 2 weeks of the season.
I got better.
Yeah. But
she turned me into a newt. Nothing? You guys know? Nothing? Oh, wow.
What is that?
It's It's from the Hunt for or the Holy Grail. Monty Python's Holy
Python. Okay.
Yeah.
I have seen that. It's been a while.
She turned me into a newt. And he's just like a guy and he's like, I got better. Anyway, he got better is what happened.
I'm just one of the dead bodies on the cart. So anyway,
bring out your dad.
Should the tattoo actually just like be fade Heifetz's strongest take in a given season?
Honestly, like it is kind of uncanny how you have like it's the thing that you fixate on. You have like a ton of good calls. I'm not even just saying that because you're my friend in podcast co-host. Like you are good at this shit. Like it's annoying actually how good you are at this stuff. And anytime you say something, I'm always like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, fuck. Like, if Heifetz is saying this, I need to rethink something because, like, you do the research, you do the work, like, you're good at this shit.
But the most
for
important
some reason,
call
like,
of the season,
the thing you fixate on though tends to be like, for whatever reason, Josh Jacobs, you fixated on him. Mike Davis, you fixated on him, and this Burrow thing you fixated on.
I think this one actually was worse than the Mike Davis one because the Mike Davis one's like a pick you missed. Whatever, you missed half the picks anyway. Missing the players who end up being one of the 5 most important players of the season is the worst thing that could happen.
I think it's hard because the Burrow thing crossed over from like a fantasy take to like a this is who I am take. And it's always when it starts to when it starts to become
it's part of my personality.
When it starts to become honestly like took over as like a bit on the show, it like became a whole narrative. And I think once you get to that point and you dig your heels in so deep, you kind of don't want to give it up, even if some signs are maybe pointing that you should.
Yeah, the worst part is it's like Josh Jacobs, like I was just wrong, and I think it was bad process. The Bengals thing, I actually think it was good process, and I was just wrong. Like, I actually think that I had a better process with that thing, and I regret, like, frankly, I wish I had moved Jamar Chase down 3 spots, but I want to be clear, I dragged our rankings down on Burrow and Chase. Like you guys were kind of
at the end of the day, though, like it wasn't that much. It was like a few spots.
To be fair, I was honestly closer to you, Heifetz, than I was DK, so I will take a little bit of an L on this too. I was definitely like, avoid the guy with a never seen before wrist injury that a quarterback's never had.
And that's the thing. I was and again, Jesus, my voice is cracking as my body's literally failing under the weight of this take. But like
my family is dying.
The way I looked at it was like, why is this thing that's never happened not priced in? And like, I do feel very confident saying from things I have heard that like Joe Burrow himself was not like sure how this would go.
Right.
At the end of
August.
August.
I mean, we saw him, was it on Pardon My Take? He was like, I can't bench press. There were some things that were concerning.
And so you never know. And I was like, I feel like that wasn't priced in. Now he's like, it didn't matter. Like it didn't matter. And I think that's the thing. It's like, I think, but the thing is, the other part of it that I think I fucked up is Jamar Chase is my favorite receiver. And I think that the actual thing that's more important, like, so you get shit wrong. We talk about shit all the time. You're never gonna be right about everything. The part that, like, when I played Madden for the first time a few years ago, the first thing I did, I flipped Saquon for Jamar Chase. And I'm like, I hated Jamar Chase being this good. And I'm like, fuck, I don't have him anywhere except my dynasty leagues. I'm like, this sucks. How do I not have Jamar Chase? And so that sucked. And again, it goes like, he brings you joy as an elite player. It's like, whatever. But it's hand in hand with the McCaffrey thing, because if we had done that, we probably would have been like, fuck with McCaffrey too. So
I know. I wish you would have fixated on McCaffrey more.
The funniest possible outcome is that next season in week 2, Joe Burrow hurts his wrist.
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh my God, yeah. Right as I'm like, I'm all in. I'm all in on Joe Burrow.
Yeah, we're back. With that said, a small mini tattoo of mine. This will go on like my finger, you know, like when you get the mustache and you hold it above your lip. Like it'll be that.
Right.
I will take Jamar Chase first if I have first pick or whatever. I don't care what happens unless somebody gets hurt. I will be drafting Jamar Chase 101. I've never had him. I've seen enough. I want him every year. I never get him. He's the most electric receiver in the league. I want him so bad. I will be doing it. You can't talk me out of it.
I will be doing it. He's getting the Triple Crown, right? Receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns.
I genuinely am sorry to everybody who doesn't have the Bengals this year. Like, it's my fault. You can blame me.
117 catches, 1,600 yards, 16 touchdowns.
Also, do you remember when Cooper Kupp did the Triple Crown? Mm-hmm. That was like a huge deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? I mean, I know why. Like, they're not going to make the playoffs, and maybe that is exactly the cutoff. No one's talking about Jamar Chase getting the Triple Crown. No one cares.
It's different.
It does seem to be flying under the radar a little, yeah.
Well, look, I think Jamar Chase is known to be the best receiver in the league, if not, or number 2 or number 3. He was like a top 10 pick. Cooper Kupp was 28 years old.
He was a white guy.
A white guy who's 28 years old, coming off a season with 3 touchdowns. And he also basically had 2,000 yards. So in 145 catches, it's a little different. Like the whole Bill trophy size thing. If there was the size of the Triple Crown trophy, Jamar Chase's would be smaller than Cooper Kupp's.
Yeah, that's true.
He's 24 years old.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Wild.
How is he 24?
He's so good.
Dude, Chase is...
I will do anything to have him next year.
We haven't talked about this, but so we're not going to do a Friday show this week. So just for New Year's and everything. So we didn't talk about enough. We did talk about T. Higgins. The Bengals screwed up not getting a deal done with Chase and tagging Higgins. And like, this is where I've come to. I understand the idea that the Bengals were like, maybe you don't want to pay Joe Burrow $50 million a year and pay Jamar Chase 33 or whatever, and then also pay T. Higgins, you're like, do you want like, a third of your budget basically and 3 guys on offense? You want to spread that around? And that makes sense on paper, right? But I don't know how you guys feel. I look at this team and I'm like, it just so happens that your 3 best players are a quarterback and 2 receivers. Just pay those guys. What are the odds that you take the $30 million a year you're going to give T. Higgins and find a player as good as T. Higgins? You're going to have to just hit your draft picks and free agency money on defense in the line. And it's like, you are not going to replace. This is like the best offense a 9-win team will ever have in NFL history is what the Bengals just did. Why are you going to get rid of it?
I very much agree. It's the one thing you do well, and you're going to get rid of it.
Yeah, so this happened a lot during like when I was covering the Seahawks early on. Like people were obsessed with cap space, having cap space. The idea of having cap space exists so you can sign good players with that money.
It's the Family Guy.
Using your cap space on very good players is actually a good thing. Like having extra cap space for the potential future, like actually doesn't do anything for you.
Mystery box. Yeah.
Use the cap space on very good players who make your team really good. You know what I mean? Like using that cap space is actually a good thing. Like I think sometimes people are just like, oh, we don't have any cap space. We don't have any cap space. Like, no, you have very good players. Like that's what the cap space is for.
Cap space in the NFL is not irrelevant, but it's close. Like the Saints are the only team where it actually matters. But like we haven't talked about this with the Giants on this show, but I think that's the mistake actually the Giants made. Where if you look, the players that left the Giants are playing great. Like Leonard Williams and Julian Love for the Seahawks are awesome. Like Xavier McKinney for the Packers was a safety who was in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation halfway through the season. Saquon getting 2,000 yards. And I think the Giants looked at it. They're like, oh, well, we don't want to pay running backs and safeties in positions that don't matter. But what they forgot was the GM before them, Dave Gettleman, didn't give a fuck about positional value. So your good players are at running back and safety. So like Saquon's a captain. They let him go. Xavier McKinney's a captain, play caller with the green dot and the radio. Let him go. Julian Love's a captain. And you're like, positional value is a secondary thing. The primary one is keep the good players on your football team.
This is and this is exactly what the Lions have been doing for forever. It's like we quibble and pick nits about which positions they're picking in which order during the draft, and it just turns out they're picking good players, and that's what you ultimately want to do. The order probably shouldn't fucking matter. Obviously, it matters a little bit with like how much you're paying each guy in that position, and like there is something to like positional value and like overpaying for a certain position. I get that. But like ultimately, like at the end of the day, you want good players on your team. Like that is the ultimate top priority. Take good players.
So at the end of this podcast, we will conclude that the keys to fantasy football and real football, just take good players.
Honestly,
good players.
It is the fucking truth. Like we lose track of that. We lose track of the ultimate goal here. Stick with the teams that score a lot of points. I know this sounds simple, but like again, these are we're reminding ourselves the basic stuff that you kind of forget when you're in the draft.
This is the simple thing. This is similar to a tattoo I had where you marry the whole family. Like when you take a player, you're in on that team, and if you want to believe that team's going to be good, who's the head coach, and or who's in charge of the offense? Who's the quarterback? Who's the offensive line? Then who are the pass catchers? In that order. Because the coach's job is to make every player better. And then the quarterback's job is to execute the making of everyone better. And then the offensive line protects the quarterback. And the receivers, frankly, are the end output that get all the credit. But like they're kind of the last in the equation unless you're Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. And so I think the Caleb Williams really illustrates this problem to me of like, if I made a mistake with Caleb, and I still believe everything I've said about Caleb will be good. But I think the mistake we made this season is Caleb Williams with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and Roman Dunze. Everyone knew he had those 3 guys. We never talked about how their guards sucked. We never talked about Braxton Jones at left tackle. We never talked about Shane Waldron, who
we talked about it, but we didn't put enough stock into it yet.
Yeah, you're right, actually.
We were blinded by Caleb's,
And we played the clip on the show 6 times of like Jackson Smith and Jigba in Seattle being like, what do you think of Shane Waldron? He's like, are we live? Good luck. Like, and it's like, hey, that was actually a giant red flag. That wasn't like just a bit. That actually was a really good hint that he would be fired midway through the season. And it's hard to figure out what coordinators are going to be good and bad. But like it turns out that Caleb Williams and Shane Waldron are not as good as Bo Nix and Sean Payton. And like that has to get remembered that next season, the coach, the overall quality of the coaching and the offensive line and everything, you have to believe in the holistic team. and the situation. It just matters so much more than when we talk about these guys individually.
I mean, it's like, and the teams that were really bad this year that were really frustrating in fantasy, the Giants, the Patriots, the Jags, the Panthers, the Titans, like we could have easily predicted these teams were going to be frustrating and we still signed up for a lot of these players. You know what I mean? Like obviously there's a handful of outliers like Brian Thomas.
Right. But trying to find those is just so much harder than just taking a guy who's on an already good team.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Malik Neighbors, obviously.
The tough part
really
is that if you hit on Brian Thomas, you likely are in the playoffs because you got him in the 8th round. And
it's about cost though, because Brian Thomas, if you depending what platform you drafted, it's like probably like the 10th pick you made, which is like, that's a smart bet. It's like, he's a first round rookie in the 10th pick. I think
also the first round rookie receivers is kind of like a caveat to that rule.
Well, that one, DK, you've been on this. This is the one of the first tattoos we got where you're just like, take rookie receivers, hold them. And this is 5 years going on now where this has worked perfectly.
I mean, it's like it's one of the most predictable things I think we've seen in fantasy football over the last 4 or 5 years is just hold your rookie receivers. Even if they start slow, just hold on to them. I obviously, there is some luck in terms of like picking which one is going to end up going off because it's not like every rookie receiver goes off. But like, I think it's still worth just investing in these guys in your draft, holding on to them. If anybody drops,
hold fast
to the moon. So basically, like just for an example, this year from week 8 on, so basically the half after the first half of the season, Lad McConkey, the wide receiver 11, Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver 12. Brian Thomas Jr. over the full season literally was the 4th highest scoring receiver in half PPR. Malik Neighbors, halfway through the season, wide receiver 18. Jalen McMillan came on really, really strong. He was the wide receiver 26, averaging almost 12 points a game. I'm saying wide receiver 26 doesn't sound great.
Xavier Worthy had 40 points the last 2 weeks, I think.
Xavier Worthy, another great example. Going back to last year, from week 8 on, Tank Dell was wide receiver 9. Jaden Reed, wide receiver 11. Puka Nacua obviously had a huge year, the entire year.
What about Marvin Harrison? How did he do?
Oh, that's actually a great question. Let me look that up, Craig, because I think it's going to be better than you expected.
That might be true because my expectations are low.
Hold on, let me just. I'm actually just curious.
Fewer passes this season than Ray McLeod.
Oh, are you serious?
Yep, that's a fact.
Hey, Ray had a great year.
Yeah, I guess so.
Hold on, it's loading.
It's funny. If Marvin Harrison had the same season that Lad McConkey had this year, Marvin Harrison would be a first round draft pick in fantasy drafts next year, and Lad won't be.
I will say though, I don't know if this is exactly a tattoo for me, but I kind of think you should just buy the dip in every scenario. Like I think that's kind of one of my other takeaways. Just be humble about everything, and like it's I guess it's also the DK the drill tweet you always talk about. Like the wise man bowed his head and said, "There's zero difference between good and bad things. You fucking idiot, you imbecile." And I'm like, if I've watched Sam Darnold get a 1 seed maybe and Baker Mayfield second in every passing category, and Bryce Young is actually better than CJ Stroud on this season. Think about it. Bryce Young outplayed CJ Stroud. All these people who are disappointing, Marvin Harrison, Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, I want to just buy the dip on all these people, to be honest.
I do too. Marvin Harrison was the wide receiver 40. He averaged 9.6 points per game over the second half of the season. Right there with Xavier Worthy, which is like not saying a lot, obviously, but it wasn't like horrific. It just was, again, it was compared to expectations, compared to the fact that everyone was calling him like a generational wide receiver prospect. Obviously very disappointing. But yeah, getting back to what I was talking about, like, wide receiver, or in 2022 from week 8 on, it was like Garrett Wilson and Christian Watson were like league winning type of players. They helped you get to the finals. Jalen Waddle was that guy in 2021, Justin Jefferson in 2020. So, and I don't think like anyone would have predicted this mix of guys that maybe they did. I think it was a little surprising, the exact mix of guys who ended up with 1,000 yards receiving this year as the rookies, with Brian Thomas, Lad McConkey being involved in that, because I think people figured they would be slower developing and for whatever reason I think people were more like Malik Neighbors, Odunze, and Marvin Harrison are going to be the dudes. They're going to be the studs. But Lad McConkey looks like one of the best rookie receivers. Brian Thomas looks like a superstar. And obviously Jalen McMillan came on strong, and it helped that he had some injuries on his offense, but that's why I think this is why you hold these guys and you invest in them, and just, because as the year goes on, they start to kind of like learn the offense and earn the trust of the quarterback.
Trading, drafting and holding, or just buying the dip on rookie receivers like 6 weeks into the season, 7 weeks into the season is as good at fantasy advice as we've ever given on the show. And it's worked every year.
I'm so mad I dropped Jalen McMillan. He was really mediocre. He basically was like
he didn't do anything.
A
for
non-factor for the first month after Chris Godwin went down, and then he took off.
We need to put the bye weeks for these guys. Like the before and after splits are ridiculous for some of the rookie receivers.
Yeah, the rookie
bye weeks. And I think
the rookie bye week bump.
I wish we'd hit more was like with Xavier Worthy was how Rashee Rice did fucking nothing for the first 3 months last year as a rookie, and then was the top 6 receiver. And Xavier Worthy had a similar thing where like once December Andy Reid's like, yeah, all right, kid, you can do this now. So that one's truly a tattoo we need on our faces. Before we move on, I have to. Did I tell you guys this Ladd McConkey stat that flashed during the Patriots broadcast? I couldn't believe this. So to refresh everyone's memories, the Chargers traded up with the Patriots for Ladd McConkey, and they traded up 3 picks. The Chargers went up and got Ladd McConkey.
God, yeah,
and the Patriots went back 3 picks and took Jalen Polk out of Washington. Ladd McConkey.
The Patriots are just absolutely cursed.
Ladd McConkey had more yards against the Patriots on Saturday than Jalen Polk has all season.
Which is 94 yards?
Yes.
Jesus.
And so not only did McConkey against New England have more yards than Polk did as a rookie, it gets worse. In exchange for flipping those guys, the Patriots moved up a grand total of like 20 spots in the 4th round. And the Patriots took Javon Baker as a receiver. The Chargers moved back 20 spots and took Tarheeb Still, who's like a starting cornerback for them.
Yeah.
Tarheeb Still, a cornerback, has 4 picks. Javon Baker has no catches, which means the cornerback the Chargers took has more catches than the receiver the Patriots took in this trade.
And this is on a team that just needs all the help it can get at receiver. It's just wild. It's
So
not
again,
like
good
some
teams.
guys are like holding him from the starting lineup. I actually, you guys remember a couple of years ago when DeAndre Swift dropped a game-winning pass in his first game in the NFL, or maybe it was like his second game. And I'm like, sliding doors. Swift would have been a superstar if he had made that catch. Obviously, who knows? But like, I just like to think of it this way. But because he dropped it, like his career has kind of fizzled, honestly. Like he's okay, but whatever. Jalen Polk had I'm trying to remember the exact specifics of it. I think it would have been like a game-winning catch or like a really important touchdown catch in like week 1 or 2. And he didn't get his second foot down. If he would have caught that, his confidence through the roof, I think he would have had a really good rookie year. And now instead, everyone like hates him and thinks he sucks. Like this is one of those sliding door moments. Cause I mean, like this is me sticking to my bias a little bit. I liked him in the preseason, or I liked him coming into the draft and everything. I didn't think he was going to be a superstar, but I thought he'd be like a good, reliable receiver. And he's turned out to be anything but. Like he has no confidence. He has so many drops. Every time he gets an opportunity, he's just like, he's so in his own head. He just like fucks it up. He gets like a penalty or a drop or whatever. And so now like, and also just like the whole Patriots can't pick a receiver thing is like weighing, like that's also just on his back, I think. So anyways, tough situation. Should have caught that ball for the touchdown. Everything would have been different.
Craig, where's your next tattoo and what is it?
Right below my eye, I think. And
Teardrop?
Teardrop. It is get you a man that can do both. I am talking about the quarterback position. No longer will I be drafting pocket passers again. And look, it's not that pocket passers cannot pop. We saw what Burrow did this year. Burrow was the number 3 quarterback in fantasy. Baker, top 5, had a great year. It's the risk that comes with drafting a pocket passer, and more specifically, the lack of risk that comes with taking a guy who is a dual threat. And if you look at this year, sure, Burrow was there, Baker popped, but the rest of the guys, you got your Josh Allen, your Lamars, your Jalen Hurts, they're always there. Jaden Daniels has now entered that category. Last year, same thing. The top 2 quarterbacks, Allen and Lamar, and Jalen Hurts. Last year, Joe Burrow was the 23rd quarterback in points per game, and Baker Mayfield was the 17th. And so, sure, they can pop. It can happen. If you end up getting Baker in the 10th round, that's awesome. But just the floor, 5 of the top 7 quarterbacks every single year are going to be, until they get hurt, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Hell, 3 years ago, Kyler Murray and Justin Fields were not even playing well, and they were top 7 guys. So you can add Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Those 4 guys will be in the top 6 to 7 every year in fantasy unless they get injured. And you can't say that for any pocket passer in the league, I would say, at all. Maybe Joe Burrow, but again, last year, Joe Burrow, 23rd in the league in points per game. So
the defense had to collapse for Burrow to get to the point where he had to throw 300 yards for them to win
there
the
are
game.
always situations
Every
where
game.
like the outlier seasons where that will happen. But like, it's just asking a lot. People like CJ Stroud or Jared Goff, you basically need to run completely 100% pure for an entire season just to compete with them.
That's a great way of saying it. I think like there's an element of whack-a-mole with the pocket passers. If you're wanting to invest in an early down or early round pocket passer, there's so much whack-a-mole. Like I think you already said this, but like last year, Kirk Cousins, C.J. Stroud, Dak Prescott were three of the top 10 quarterbacks in fantasy, and now C.J. Stroud like quarterback 27 on the year.
Yeah,
just because they don't have the floor that a lot of these dual threat quarterbacks have of like literally like 5 points a game from rushing. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, and Jordan Love's another one. Jordan Love last year, QB5. This year, I don't know, he's like somewhere in the teens. He's just like a really middling average quarterback in terms of fantasy.
And that's also in part because the Packers defense got better, which is a huge part, which is harder to predict. A part of the whole, it's an ecosystem of how much yards a quarterback needs to win games, or, you know, why they're losing games. And here's my question for you guys with quarterbacks next year. Because if there's something I think we got right about this season, is we got Jaden Daniels right. And I hope a lot of people listening have Jaden Daniels, and he was incredible last 2 weeks. And I think where we went right was we were basically like, we don't know how his season will go, but there is a scarcity of rushing quarterbacks that bumped him up our ranks. And I want to ask you guys about that, because I did what you did, Craig, too, and I kind of made raw ranks blind for next season. And I think it's obvious to say Lamar, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts are the top four. And then there's next tier of Joe Burrow and Mahomes, I would say, are like different because they're not going to run as much. And that's 6 guys. And then the next 6, in whatever order you want to put them in, I don't care. Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Purdy, Jordan Love, pocket passers that are good. Then there's another 6 guys. 2, like pocket passers that are more, you don't know what's going to happen. Dak off an injury. Tua, Geno Smith, Matt Stafford, Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, Michael Penix, Russell Wilson. That's 20 people I just listed. 20 people. Like Michael Penix or Russell Wilson. And that does not include, and I'm curious, where do you insert these guys? Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, Kyler Murray, Drake May, and I'll even throw in Bo Nix, because those are the people who can run. And I don't know where to put them, because Caleb Williams, Richardson, Kyler, Drake May, these are all people who can run for 5 or 6, maybe more touchdowns, especially obviously Richardson. And I don't know how to, like, I'm obviously more confident Darnold will play better next year, or like Baker, but like, I almost think it's more, if Trevor Lawrence is like the 20th best, if you throw in those 6 people, Trevor Lawrence is like the 24th quarterback next year. Michael Penix, like Matt Stafford might be the 26th quarterback in fantasy next year. And in that world where Russell Wilson and Stafford are 25th and 26th quarterback, I think you actually have to reach for Drake May and reach for Anthony Richardson, just because that's the ceiling. You can get the floor from anywhere.
I think I'm off the Richardson ride. I'm like, this goes back to the earlier stuff we were talking about, like at the beginning of the show, where you're just like wanting to get toxic people out of your life. There's too much baggage with what's going on with him. I don't know. I don't have any inside information, but something's weird is happening in Indianapolis with him, and I just don't want to be on that train. And also, just don't think I don't know if he's good enough. Like, you know what I mean? He's a good runner when he does run, but
it feels like Shane Steichen or Anthony Richardson. One of those two will not be in Indianapolis next year.
I think that's an in the moment thing, though, because here's the thing: we were excited for him this year, and we took him. He's a top 60 pick.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the general outness, everyone's out on this guy.
You can get him a lot later next year.
120th?
Sure. Yeah.
You're not going to take him like 120th pick in the draft, Anthony Richardson?
I'm not out on him. It's a beautiful disaster, but I still am intrigued. I had him this year in fantasy, and it was a disaster, but the ceiling is still very tantalizing with him.
I think he's going to be so on my avoid list next year. It's not that I've given up hope that he's going to do anything. I don't want to be on that ride. And I think I'm going to say the same about Caleb Williams, honestly, too. It's like, I think I'm too invested in Caleb Williams being good. I don't want to double down on him and then have him like suck ass again. And like in fantasy too, because in fantasy, he was such a, like, he was a QB 17, but he was very disappointing. He was all over the place. And there was too many games where he scored like 6 points. And it was like, it kind of like fucked over people who had him on their fantasy teams. And so it's like Richardson and Caleb, like these guys are very much like examples of get toxic people out of your life. And the situation is just too muddied, too annoying.
Richardson
I don't want to be a
21
part
points
of it.
a week ago.
Yeah. And then you were saying yesterday he got like shadow benched.
I do think he got shadow benched.
Like, do you want to deal with that again next year?
More than any quarterback maybe ever that's really good at fantasy, he genuinely can't throw the ball.
No. but also like
He's a little
he's going to be
problem
going in the
happy.
same range as Tyler Algier. So I'll take a
I
shot.
agree. It's also different. If you're in a 2-quarterback league, I don't know. I think it's a little scary just being like, I'm going to depend on Caleb Williams or Anthony Richardson, because if they flame out, it can get tricky. If you're in a 1-quarterback league and you want to grab them as a backup, and if they end up being awesome, you can start
that's
them.
fine.
That's fine.
Buy the dip. Anyway, other tattoos. DK, what other tattoos you got? Where are they going?
Let's see here. What else I got?
Do you have anything on your ass?
Yeah, this go on my ass with my assless chaps. Ride with the wild hogs.
I feel like you do have a wild hog tattoo on your butt. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be very cool. Yeah, I agree.
Yes, son. That would be cool.
For people that have not seen Wild Hogs, Craig, can you explain?
I've seen that movie.
Explain what I mean by riding with the wild hogs.
Tim Allen's old and goes on a bike
Take
ride
old
with his
guys.
friends.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's like, who is it? It's Tim Allen. Is it Bill Macy? John Travolta?
John Travolta. Yeah.
And I don't know who the fourth is. But yeah.
Another
Travolta
reference
he
I haven't
is
actually
in
seen
that.
the movie.
Yeah,
but
Travolta's in it.
Wow.
It's ride with the old dogs. You know, the savvy old vets, Mike Evans. Sometimes
the guys that the coaches trust, man, and the quarterbacks trust.
The guys that
I
have
think
been doing
James
it for
Conner.
years.
James Conner is a perfect example of this. They drafted a guy who I really liked in Trey Benson in the early third round, and it's like, yeah, he's super talented, super explosive. Like, they're going to use this guy more, but the problem is it's so hard to unseat the old savvy veterans, and we see this year in and year out. Like, teams just trust these guys. I mean, look at Zach Ertz. We gave up on him 3 years ago. They drafted Ben Sinnott, and everyone's all excited about this guy, and Zach Ertz is out here being a top 10 tight end.
It's like when you buy your grandpa a Bluetooth speaker, you try to show him how to work it. Of course, it doesn't go well the first time. He sticks to his stereo that he's had for 20 years.
100%. So I just think it's like, and this is like general across all the positions, it's like very much harder to unseat the established veterans who have the trust of the team, who have the trust of the quarterback. Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Derrick Henry, James Conner, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones. These are not guys necessarily that we faded this year, but like, it's just so much harder than you think for guys to like unseat these guys and take over and get their, their target share or their carry share, just get their goal line carries, whatever it be. Like, Kareem Hunt was on his couch, came back in, and was like a very valuable fantasy player for the Chiefs down the stretch, just because he knew their system and they trust him. He's slow as fuck, but he breaks tackles. And he and James Conner to me are like kind of like the poster children of this. But I would just say trust the old guys.
And
Mike Evans.
Receiver, I think that we joked about this, but it's like Craig's 30. I'm turning 30 in March, and it's like, 30 is the new 25. But the looming shadow of the word 30. We just have to get over it, because at Game of Thrones style, you're like, actually, Mike Evans is 20 and 11. Like, we have to get over, we need a metric system for 30 where we don't call it 30 because it has such a connotation. But until we see them decline.
It's going to be hard next year when Mike Evans turns 32 on August 21st. That's 30 is one thing when I see 32.
Yeah.
But you need to literally tie me down and draft Mike Evans for me. Because if I start to say stuff about him being 32 and this might be the end, don't let me do that. Don't open your eyes, Marion. Don't look at his age, Marion.
Dude, he's not slowing down, man. Wait till he slows down. I think that's part of the thing, too, is like, forget Adam Thielen still out there, like, killing it in the playoffs. Obviously, you have to deal with the injuries with some of these guys, but when they're in there, it's awesome. By the way, my dog is barking his head off. I apologize. I'll try and plow through it here.
Oh, wow. He really is going.
Yeah. He's a Great Pyrenees mix, which is like a guardian dog. It's like in his DNA to just fucking bark his head off whenever anyone comes to our house.
DNA is insane. Like, the idea that like wild. Dogs just know to herd things is fucking crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, corgis just walking around, and like my Jackie's brother has a corgi, and if you leave the room, the corgi's like, "What the fuck are you doing, bro?
Yeah.
Get back
here."
Like,
my buddy has
how
a
does
red.
He know that?
My buddy has a red healer. And he will literally like go around you and like push you in towards the rest of the group if you leave.
How
oh my God.
They know to just herd? That's crazy.
Instinct is a weird thing. Just
it is.
If we're talking like big meta stuff, instinct, like when kangaroos are born or whatever, it's like they have the instinct to crawl into the pouch or whatever. It's like these things can't even think. How do they know to do that shit?
Oh my God, dude, the Planet Earth video with the iguana that comes up and then just like beats all these snakes. It's like the first thing that comes out of the egg. And
they're like, they were telling me about this.
Run to the sea.
Subconscious.
Insane. Yeah. So that
anyway, so George is barking his head off.
His instinct is like, yeah, hell yeah. He's like, go with the old guys. It's in his bones.
Part of me is, part of me is like, I don't want to talk George out of this because he just gets so much joy from doing his job.
Right.
You know?
My next tattoo, it's a tattoo too. I'm putting this on my face. So I don't want to forget it. I'm looking at it in the mirror every day. I'm calling this the 2-2 rule. And we talked about injuries. It's like, we want the guy the year after, right? And I think this is also one of the ones that served us really well, where it's like, we got Saquon right like 4 years in a row, where it's like, you don't want the guy gets hurt, comes back from injury, you get all the reports. And it's like, don't take him that year. He's going to be disappointing. Wait one more season and then everyone's out on him and then he's good that year. And it works over and over and over and over again. And basically it's like, take the guy 2 years after he gets hurt. So like, I don't want any Brandon Ayuk next year. I don't want any Chris Godwin next year. Like anyone in a season-ending injury that's serious.
This is a bummer.
Tony Pollard last year. It's like, don't take them. They're not themselves yet. Don't take them. Take them the year after.
Yeah.
Rashee Rice. Like these are not people I want next year.
I think fading Rice and going for Worthy, is that going to be the play? That's scary to me.
You do
but
not
I don't
want
know.
Rashee Rice. But here's the thing, though. The thing to remember is there are people that were not fully themselves this year. People are going to be out on. I went through my tight end rankings and it's just blind exercise. I ranked Brock Bowers as my top tight end for next year. Trey McBride second. Do you guys know who I put third? I thought about it a little, but not a lot. But I actually think will be third.
TJ Hawkinson.
TJ Hawkinson, who people kept on
TJ Hawkinson.
TJ Hawkinson. I saw it with my own eyes. The last 2 weeks, he's back.
Too many syllables.
He's back. He got hurt last year in December, and he wasn't himself. He's back. He's himself. Next year, TJ Hawkinson, I think, will be a top 3 tight end. Yeah. But like, he's not good. I don't think he'll get ranked that way. You know who else we didn't talk about enough? Mark Andrews. Like, we focused too much on the car accident. He came off tightrope surgery. You know who's like had a ton of touchdowns in the second half of the season to be really useful? Mark Andrews. To me, that's a top 5 tight end you won't have to pay top 5 for next year because he had surgery and then like wasn't himself. And everyone's like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? This was the tightrope surgery.
Yeah, I feel like this is low-key a result of the like video game culture and movie culture where guys come back and they're just like 100%. There's actual like human issues with coming back from injuries. And by the way, these guys are playing at the highest level of professional sports where everyone's the best athlete that you've ever seen from your fucking hometown. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a razor's edge margin. The margins here are non-existent. And if you're playing hurt, you're going to look shitty because all these other guys are fucking fast and strong and big and powerful. And it's just like, you know what I mean? Like you kind of forget the human aspect of it.
So what's the second half of this rule?
I have a breakthrough for you boys. We have not talked about this yet. I have a breakthrough. I think the hardest part, nothing's hard about being a fantasy football fucking analyst, but the hardest, nothing's difficult. But the hardest part though, is when people ask us a start sit question about a really good player who's hurt versus someone who's not as good, but healthy. Mm-hmm. It's like, should I play Aaron Jones with this ankle injury? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how Aaron Jones' ankle's really doing, to tell you the truth. Like I am trying. And I think I actually had a breakthrough because generally speaking, it's like, well, if they're going to play, you want to go with the guys who brought you there, right? And I had a realization of the simplest possible template for this. And I realized it with the James Conner injury. If the player is playing because he pushed to play early, don't play him. Like if it's actually a question, like if within 24 hours of the game, nobody really knows if he's going to play, don't fucking play him. Like that's the rule. Because if you've gotten within 24 hours and the team itself is unsure if they will participate in a game, that means the player is not 100%, probably not 80%.
Conner rule?
But if there are tons of times you see, I think the Eagles did this with A.J. Brown, where they're like, A.J. Brown could have played this week with a hamstring injury, but we want to be cautious. He will play next week. He's going to sit out this game, get him the 10 days. Then play A.J. Brown when he's coming back the following week. But I think, frankly, like we overlooked the most common sense part of it, where it's like James Conner's playing, but no one else would play in this. It's because he's a cancer survivor, psychopath, like competitor, and he wants to be out there. He's clearly not himself. That's why they don't want him to play. And so that to me is like, it's not just, I think the year after thing has worked really well for us with injuries, We have to apply the week after thing for players during the season. And so that's why I want to call it the 2-2 rule. If someone gets hurt, wait 2 years to draft him, wait 2 weeks to play him.
I like that.
Heifetz loves marketing. Heifetz has a low-key love of just coming up with catchphrases.
It's because Craig's really good at it.
Rule.
I'm jealous. Craig does it without thinking, and I just wish I could do that like Craig does.
What are you talking about? The 2-2 rule is great. I like it.
Yeah. But I really just, if someone's hurt, it's like, yeah. Did they get hurt last week? Yeah.
I'd love to see love to see the research on this, because I think just like anecdotally, it feels very right. Like more often than not, you're going to be like super bummed out.
To be clear, if they're a full practice on Friday, yeah. But if on Friday they're like, yeah, it's a true game time decision, then you know what? That decision's been made. Don't play them.
And you feel dumber if you end up starting the guy who was hurt all week and then he plays fucking 20 snaps and you're like, you know what? I should have.
What did I think was going to happen?
Well, see what goes. Dead dove, do not eat. The guy who they were like is not healthy enough to be declared playing until an hour and a half beforehand. It was not himself.
If you ever hear the phrase or read the phrase, gonna give it a go, abort.
Exactly.
Right. Abort.
Do you guys have any other tattoos we skipped over?
I'm inked up. I think I'm good.
Yeah.
I have one last one. It's kind of two things. You guys can help me pick one. I don't know. Part of me is like, it's be open-minded. Because again, I just keep thinking about Sam Darnold is going to be the 1 seed. Baker Mayfield 2nd. Bryce Young outplaying CJ Stroud. And I'm just thinking about like, on one hand, it's like, you never know. Things change a lot. And I do think fantasy football, it's not about like being right over the season. It's like basketball. It's a game of runs. Courtland Sutton sucks. Courtland Sutton's actually the best receiver in football. Courtland Sutton sucks again. It's like being right is a fluid thing about anything.
Oh, 100%.
But the other thing I keep thinking about, and I think this is the tattoo, being right is not enough. Like, it's not enough to be right. Like, you know what Craig was right about? Rashee Rice was probably the best pick you could have made in fantasy football. That didn't fucking matter. It lasted 5 weeks. And then Patrick Mahomes, of all people, destroyed Rashee Rice's knee.
Took him out.
He lasted 3 weeks.
3 weeks. It's like, you know what, DK, you know what you were right about?
What?
Chris Godwin might be the best pick you could make in fantasy football this year. You were right. Didn't fucking matter. You probably had 4 or 5 wins, and then his knee got shredded. And it's like
it's like investing in the stock market.
Exactly. And so
you look like a super smart stock picker for a while. Yes. Over the long term, unless you're like fucking what's his face, Warren Buffett.
Well, that's kind of the thing where it's like you take elite players, take players on teams you like watching, take players that bring you joy. But even if you're right, that isn't necessarily going to be huge. And I think that that's the thing is, I'm not saying it doesn't matter if you're right or not. It's not the point, obviously. I'm just trying to say it's just often not good enough to be right. You also have to accept that luck is to a degree, which is why I'm more open to like trying to have fun while you're doing this.
This sounds like also kind of a real life New Year's resolution. Be open-minded.
Yeah.
You know?
There we go.
No one knows anything, including myself. Knowing what you don't know is as much of a skill as knowing something, in my opinion.
Yes, 100%.
What's the sorry, this is like always brought up with regards to Aaron Rodgers. It's like if you know a little, you think you're super smart, and then if you like know a lot more.
Isn't there a word for that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the word, which is ironic, probably. Yeah, Dunning-Kruger. Just be aware of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Just look that up. Just Google it.
Rodgers in the Enigma trailer where he's like, what is this? Open anything attached to nothing. Meanwhile, he seems like the most closed-minded person who's attached to stuff I've ever seen.
He's good at math, though. Man, that guy can do some quick math in his head.
Oh, my God.
Impressive.
Okay. Do you guys have any henna tattoos? Anything you're interested in that you don't know if you want to ink up, but anything on your mind as a potential tattoo or no?
No. I think I do have henna tattoos. They will bubble up in the off-season.
Email us at ringerfantasyfootball@gmail.com your Memento tattoos thing you want to remember for next season. Could be anything about a player or just an attitude, whatever.
Definitely don't tell anyone about this thing that you're doing.
I don't really want to be handcuffed.
The definition of an object is a material thing that can be seen and touched.
Fantasy Court. Court is in session. I want to start with the most emailed topic of the season, but I need to address it for these championships. I don't know why this happens on ESPN, but mostly on the Sleeper app. There's a lot of people who've emailed in saying this happened a lot because of Christmas. I had like just to take a player, Harrison Butker, on my IR slot, and then Christmas happened, and I didn't take him out, and now I can't edit my roster. And should I be able to edit my roster? And the answer is yes. Like, this is, to everybody who has this problem, it is crazy that Sleeper's like, well, you didn't fix your lineup on Wednesday, so you can't change anything, and even cutting Harrison Butker won't fix it. You're not allowed to cut him from the IR spot. That doesn't make any sense.
Locked.
That's terrible rule. It's a
But you're saying this is after the Chiefs game happened?
Yes. We have all these emails from people who are like, hey, it's Thursday, and I want to cut Harrison Butker so I can edit my lineup. I've already thought through having another kicker. He's in my lineup. I want to swap out Anthony Richardson's in my lineup. He got benched. I want to put in a different quarterback who's on my team. I can't make any changes because Harrison Butker's on my R slot. And the point is, that's dumb. Everyone can fix it. So it's like, okay. So if anyone has that issue, because it seems like the biggest issue of the entire season, you can do that. And then with that, we can move on to more interesting cases. But I can't believe how many people have this problem.
Yeah, I agree with that.
This one is for, the real fantasy court case here. This one's from John.
Johnny. Jack.
The subject line of John's email is fantasy court. Your ruling determines the champion.
Oh boy.
A lot of pressure. Yeah.
John writes, our league, 10-team league, been for the 19 years of its existence with our high school and college best friends. 19 years.
Congrats.
So that's how old Brick Johnson is. So
this is the Brick League.
Tight final, came down to Sunday night. Player A, who we'll call Andrew because that's his name, made an incredible comeback. However, our league is a buy-in of $100. Andrew has not yet paid the buy-in.
I hate this shit, man. Just pay before the draft. Don't allow people to draft until they pay.
Andrew played all season without paying. I used to be the commissioner, but I had kids and a busy job, so I gave it up. Now the commissioner is our friend Clint. Clint is inclined to tell Andrew his season is void because he never actually paid. If the league could vote out of spite, the league would likely vote to strip Andrew of the championship because we are spiteful people, and it makes for the best story, creates the longest lasting beef, and the most memorable shit talking for the next 20 years. Can you win your league if you don't pay? Which I'm sure happens all the time. Collecting money sucks, but realistically, you got to pay to play, right? We have decided to take the result of what the three of you sages say as our final decision.
God.
Including Andrew? So Andrew has yet to pay. So not like he didn't pay at the beginning of the season. He hasn't paid throughout the entire season?
I'm going to give Andrew the benefit. Well, actually, no, he wins. So I think he didn't pay because he's getting the money back. So I think the idea is he would get paid minus his entry fee.
Got it. But so he didn't like end up paying in week 10 or something like that. He has not paid yet.
No, he won. And then it's like, I want the money. And then they're like, well, you didn't win. You didn't pay. So I'm not paying you.
This is kind of tough.
My initial gut is that he should still get the winnings and that the commissioner needs to do a better job next year of getting people to pay before the draft.
I agree with that. And also people need to do a better job of getting the commissioner the money because the commissioner job sucks.
Because we're adults and stop being a dumbass. Yeah.
I think there's a difference between not paying and not being willing to pay. Like if this was some issue where you're like, hey, will you pay me? And he's like, yeah. Or like ghosting you actively. I do think it matters if you ask once or twice in a group chat that there's 100 messages in versus if you have been texted about the entry fee personally twice and ignored. That does make a difference to me. But overall, I don't think you want to shaft someone out of $500 or $1,000 because it's funny. Like, I don't know. I think
I know. This is you have to be careful with this because $600 could be a lot.
He's paid if he's paid for the previous 18 years. I think he's good for the money. I think it's funny to strip him of the title, but it's kind of bullshit to like he's paid for 18 years and the idea that you're not good.
I was gonna say the opposite of you guys. So you guys have spoken, you have voted. I think you guys majority rules. He gets the money. My suggestion that this could be like my dissent that doesn't actually count.
Oh, I like
is that
this.
He should win the league, but not get any of the money, and everyone just gets their money back.
Oh, I think it's the other way around. I think he should get the money, but no one acknowledges his championship and everyone gets to pretend it didn't happen.
It's like fucking Barry Bonds or something.
Yeah, it's like Reggie Bush's Heisman. Yeah, it's like not going to the Hall of Fame.
That's hard to do, though. Like, how can you do that? Like, he won.
No one ever acknowledges it, and if it comes up, everyone pretends he lost.
I guess.
Also, if you didn't pay, then you don't get the money. I think that's like...
I hear you, but like the flip side is, if the collection process is, hey, everyone, entry fee is this, please Venmo me. And it's in one of the, you know what I mean? And then like people are talking about rules and stuff, and it's 100 texts up in a group chat, and you come home from work and you're like, I can't read all this. And then like you flash forward, you won the league, and they're like, hey, you never Venmo me, we're not paying you. And you're like, dude, you didn't even request me on Venmo. I think that's crazy. I don't know if that's what happened, but I do think there's a middle ground where it's like, if you asked the group text one time and someone forgot and you never got texted personally and you're like, yeah, we're not going to pay you now. I think that's kind of bullshit.
I would be interested. Obviously, if we were doing Discovery, I'd be interested to hear how many times they actually asked him for the money.
As a commissioner of a league, you can't get anything done in a group text. A group text is unproductive. You have to go to the source one by one, send a Venmo link to each of the 10 or 12 or however many people are in your league and do it that way. So I don't know how much the commissioner actually went after this guy. But I mean, look, just set him to auto draft if he doesn't pay.
I think
you can do things.
I think I just look at it more like if the league is now and you look through, oftentimes it would be great if everyone paid ahead of time. A lot of times you're going to have like 8 people paid, 9 people paid, 1 or 2 people maybe slip through to the end. But if at the end of the season you Venmo them and then they don't respond and then you like hit the little reminder on Venmo, you text them and it's like, okay, now you can't play next season until you deal. Like you can't do that. That's bullshit. But the idea of not paying someone who participated free, I think you got to pay him. But
I gotta say, it's a pretty sick flex that he won.
Yeah, that is sick.
Like imagine being like, I don't need to pay. I'm going to win, and then he did.
Oh man. So you guys decided.
Yeah.
My dissent's on the record.
But he never won the title.
I don't think this guy should get any money. But that's
do you really? Is that what you would do if like one person in your league didn't pay?
If he didn't pay all year and I was like asking him multiple times, obviously we don't know the details here.
First
but
time
if I
texted him once.
If I had asked someone like 3 times they didn't pay any money and then he won, I'd be like, okay, well, you're not getting any money because you never fucking paid. And then I would just give everyone their money back.
I think it's a first time offense. You can't let this happen again and again.
Right.
Just make people pay before the draft.
And again, the commissionership changed. So like this is, I don't know how long Clint's been doing this as commissioner, but like I think that might be related to like a 20-year league with the new commissioner.
Was this guy being a troll or is he just genuinely a space cadet? What I would love to know more about Andrew.
Yeah.
And if he's just like kind of a cocky dick who's like, I don't need to pay.
Your character witnesses here. Yeah.
All right. Next case here. This is from a follow-up case from Emily.
M.
Hey guys, thought you might want an update on the status of the league where our friend drunk dropped Amon-Ra St. Brown and Marvin Harrison for DeMarcus Robinson and Brandon Cooks. She kept Amon-Ra but lost Marvin Harrison Jr., which ended up being better for her in the long run. She ended up in the championship. So in conclusion, fantasy's stupid. We don't know why we play this game.
Drunk drops are sober thoughts, you know? Great move.
Wow. It's funny that a couple of the fantasy courts that we've adjudicated this year have turned out to be like the person actually did make a good move, like the guy
trading with his 9-year-old or whatever.
The dad who traded with his kid ended up losing the trade
because he traded for Ken Walker, who got hurt immediately after.
Yeah.
Do you know what exercise we joked about that we should do next season is if you could, literally we joked about 2 weeks into the season, if you could just pick your lineup, you can pick any players you want for the rest of the season. Would you win your league? Right. Like 2 weeks into the year, you get to literally you can have all first rounders if you want. Would we have won? You know what I mean? Like we wouldn't have taken Jamar Chase 2 weeks into the season because the Bengals started in week 3. You know what I mean? It's kind of funny to think about.
I went through and looked at if you didn't have a pick in the first 10 rounds of your draft, could you still have made the playoffs? And you kind of could. You could have Sam Darnold. If you didn't have a pick in the first 10 rounds.
You'd have Baker Darnold.
Dude, that's
wild. You could have Baker Darnold, J.K. Dobbins, Chuba Hubbard, Bucky Irving, Juwan Jennings, Darnell Mooney, Adam Thielen, Jonnu Smith. It's a pretty good team.
Yeah.
Damn.
It's like a solid team.
All right, DK, let's do some emails. You mentioned earlier the local Luke Ridnours, which again is part of your point you always try to make during draft season, that anyone you've ever seen play football, anyone at the NFL Combine, even the worst player you've ever seen is the best player in the history of wherever they're from.
Was a legend in their small town.
Everyone remembers this person.
Was like windmill dunking on your ass in high school.
There's like a bar named after them.
Yeah, like a god. Literally like a god.
You've never been more embarrassed playing this player.
So we got a great email from Zach. I like
Zachary.
Zach says, in high school, I was a pretty good football player. I was the captain of my team, and I was an all-state center.
Okay.
I was excited to try and play football in college until I played against Richard Rodgers.
Oh, sure.
The tight end?
Former Packers tight end.
He was the Packer tight end who caught the Hail Mary versus
the
Detroit.
Most average guy.
Richard Rodgers.
Richard Rodgers.
Dick Rodgers.
Never, I think he broke 30 catches in a season one time.
Yeah.
Zach writes, I cannot express enough how good Richard Rodgers was at football in high school.
Richard Rodgers. Such a
Richard
good
Rodgers
name.
was so big on defense that he played nose tackle. But he
Damn.
was so fast that on offense, he played wide out. And Richard Rodgers,
D tackle and wideout.
he's nose tackle wide out in high
That's
school.
great.
And then he says, Richard Rodgers was twice as strong as me. I was the strongest offensive lineman. He's twice as strong as I was, but he was faster than anyone on our team. And he says, our kick returner almost ran a kickback, but Richard Rodgers caught him.
Richard. I love how Richard Rodgers.
The nose tackle. And says, our game plan was to triple block Richard Rodgers on every play with both guards and the center.
Rodgers.
And he
The
still
more you
led
say
the team in
Richard
tackles.
Rodgers, the better the story gets.
He sounds like a superhero.
They're literally every
Our plan
single
was
play,
to block Richard Rodgers with 3 people. And then
Three
Richard
linemen
Rodgers
trying to get him.
somehow made a sack. Richard Rodgers later on offense scored a touchdown.
It's the other one I love. I love the local narratives. The other one, this was from Raphael.
Raphael.
Rafael.
Rafi.
In high school, my school played against, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. It's Ethan Posic's school.
Posich.
I've never actually say it out loud. Is it Posich or
I think it's Postage. He was on the Seahawks. He got
he's
drafted in the second
he's
round.
the center for the Browns. And I've never
Yeah.
actually had to say his name out loud in my whole life. At the time, Ethan Posich was ranked as a top 5 offensive tackle in the state. He was 6'6", 280 pounds in high school.
Big fella.
6'6", 280. I was an extremely undersized linebacker, and I remember one particular play. I was rushing off the edge. I watched Ethan Posich block our defensive end with one arm, and on the other arm, he planted his palm into my chest so effortlessly, he knocked me on my ass that I did a full flip.
It's like a fucking Marvel movie.
And if you asked me back then, I would have said that Ethan Posich was the next Jonathan Ogden.
I mean, yeah, 6'8", 280. He went to LSU, so he must have been
Yeah.
a really high recruit. I want to look up what he was.
His PFF grade among centers this year is 29th.
Dude, I play in a like a local basketball league in LA with some former Ringer guys, and there's some dudes in the league who played in college. There's this one guy on the team played D2 ball. He was like first team all league in his small D2 conference, and he cooks us. He is so good. He is like 6'5", can hit every three so smooth, effortless, and he was like D2 basketball player and just incredible.
D2.
This is
That's
probably the best real life application of what standard deviations are, where it's like ultimately just the Brian Scalabrine meme of like Brian Scalabrine telling the guy at the gym, I'm closer to LeBron James than you are to me.
Yeah.
And like, that's actually what standard deviations are.
100%.
Like,
Dude, Ethan Posich, he was a 4-star recruit, top 100. He was 72nd nationally, according to 24/7 Sports. He was the number 7 tackle in the country. This is like just being a top 100 recruit in any context. You're like one of the best high school players, period, in the fucking country. And then he got drafted in the second round. He was very average to downright bad for the Seahawks. He went to the Browns. I think he's been okay for them. He's just like a very standard, fair, replaceable NFL player. And this is like an insane athlete, like one of the best athletes this guy's probably ever seen in his life. Top 100 recruit.
One thing we always talk about in our basketball league is like, who is the worst player that could be on our team that would guarantee us a championship? Like, we were like, if Leandro Barbosa right now joined our team, he's probably like 45. He used to be in the Warriors. Like, would we just immediately win?
you do not need an NBA player.
We're like what? Like, if Charles Barkley right now was on the team, would we just immediately win the title? He's like, what? How old is he? 60?
Oh my God. That's funny. Yeah. Who's the oldest person you could fit?
Yeah. Do you think if Michael Jordan was on our rec league team, it'd be like we would kill everybody, or no?
You know, it's funny you say that. Michael Jordan's fucking still, what is he, 6'6"? Like,
Yeah.
he's gonna make a shot.
I don't know.
The answer is
Jordan
yes.
beat
You
Michael
would fucking
Kidd
kill
Gilchrist?
everyone. The answer is yes.
He's 61. You think we'd
Did it-
kill everybody?
Yeah,
Jordan
easily.
beat Michael Kidd Gilchrist in pickup when he was like 50.
Yeah. That was 11 years ago. A long time.
There's an account,
like,
Craig.
I don't think we win with Larry Bird right now. Larry
But
Bird
like,
is
why
old.
not?
No, he's just spreading the ball around. He's just
Larry
passing.
Bird-
Larry Bird. Who's
Larry Bird
guarding
had to
Larry
retire.
Bird?
He had to retire when he was like 35 because his back didn't work, and he's 68. I do not win with Larry Bird. I'm putting the line at Larry
You're
Bird.
drawing the
Do you think
line.
Larry Bird can still make a shot?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's
How are you
Craig, there's
gonna
like
guard
an Instagram account. There's an
There
Instagram
are
account.
guys who are 6'5" that could guard him.
what Heifetz was saying about
He's almost 70 years old.
Can
He's
even
6'9", Larry Bird. I kind of think you would win with Larry Bird.
Maybe. I'd love to know.
He's 6'9". No one's gonna. You just give him the ball and he shoots and you win.
There's an account and I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's like worst NBA player versus or something, and it's like the worst guy on an NBA team, and he like plays 1-on-1 against like D2 and I think maybe even D1 players, and he just fucking works them.
It's the best.
Like it's nothing. I remember, so like what Heifetz said about like the best example of like standard deviations is so true, because like the difference between a D1 player and a D2 player in any sport, I'm thinking basketball, but like literally any sport is it's a fucking gulf. It's like massive. It's massive. And I remember like playing in high school in our league, and this is just Bellingham, Washington. Like this is not a big time or whatever, but like in my league, the number one team in the state that year, Mount Vernon, they went undefeated. This is like 3A, so it wasn't like small town school or whatever. But like they went undefeated. I think they were like 30-0. They fucking beat everybody from Seattle. They were like fucking awesome. And I'm pretty sure none of them even went D1. They like played like D2. Maybe one guy was like D1, but like. Yeah. This is like the best basketball players I've ever played. They were literally just like fucking dunking on us. And we went to state too. And they just absolutely boat raced us. And I'm pretty sure like none of them were even D1. Like it's wild how good you have to be to go D1.
Look, I mentioned it on the Sunday show, but we just did Friday Night Lights for the rewatchables in this team that it's about Permian in 1988 or whatever. This team had like the second best odds to win state in Texas. And they do the little, I don't know if it was the top division, but it was still very good. The team they played in the championship had like 10 D1 guys on their team. So anyway, but this team is very good in Texas, like a legit high school football team playing for the state championship. Afterwards, they do the little, like, what happened to them? And they all ended up like selling insurance. Like none of those guys went pro. And they were like, barely any of them went to college.
It's like I don't think people realize how fucking hard it is to go pro in any sport. Like it's insane. If you're like the worst player on an NBA team, you're so good.
Oh my God. This whole conversation reminds me of when people are like, could 100 Navy SEALs with unlimited ammo beat the Roman Empire? Could they beat Caesar's army?
Yeah, they could.
Oh my God. All right.
I could talk about this forever. I fucking love this subject for some reason. I don't know why.
Raphael's email actually has a little PS, which says, we were talking about alligators yesterday's show. Raphael says, my wife's uncle's post-retirement job was working for an airport in Florida, quote, sweeping alligators off the runway.
Jesus.
What the?
I thought...
that was his retirement job?
Yeah.
That's how he unwound after a long career.
He was in the NBA, and then... This is what but Raphael says, I thought this was her family's way of joking about the uncle having a much more technical job. But no, he literally would take a broom and shoo alligators off the runway so planes didn't run away. A broom.
That's so old school. I love that.
Also, okay. We have a big email right now, boys.
Oh boy.
Kyle, turn the TikTok camera on.
Okay.
This email is from Brandon.
Brand.
As a born and raised Florida man, I feel like I should be the one to bring this to your attention. The alligator from Happy Gilmore is still alive.
No.
And you got one eye.
You got one eye.
The alligator from Happy Gilmore is living well and living out his years in the southwest Colorado town of Mosca, Colorado, at the Colorado Gators Reptile Park.
Oh, dude, we need to make like a pilgrimage.
What year did Happy Gilmore was like 97?
How old do you think this alligator is?
47.
He's got to be 40.
The alligator is 70 years old.
Oh my God.
The alligator is 70 years old.
How long do alligators live?
I fucking don't know. I didn't know.
Dude, they can live as long. They have like no natural predators.
Alligators. His name... He's 20 minutes outside of the Great Sand Dunes National Park. Of course.
Of course.
His name is Morris the movie star.
Oh, my. What else has he been in?
I'm glad you asked. I have an article right here.
You got one eye.
I'm going to just read quote from the article. An alligator living in Colorado, who was once featured in Happy Gilmore, was the it reptile in Hollywood for decades. But before his prime, he had to be discovered, just like any other actor in the industry. According to the owner of the reptile park, in Morris's heyday, He was featured in films like Dr. Dolittle 2, Interview with the Vampire, Eraser, Blues Brothers 2000, and was on Jay Leno with Steve Irwin.
Oh.
Interview with the Vampire. I remember he eats like, what's his face? Or he comes up and tries to eat him. Anyway, it's interesting.
I couldn't get over this. And I don't know why this sounds like every other Hollywood celebrity story from the 70s. Craig, you know how you always joke? You're like, I walked into CIA and I said, get me a job, son.
Yeah.
Morris was found in a backyard in Los Angeles in 1975.
In Los Angeles?
As an illegal pet. And at the time, he was
LA
9
used to be
feet.
the best.
I know. He was 9 feet long and 10 or 20 years old. Young said Morris was given to the only person in Los Angeles who had the rights permits to have an alligator. His name was Jim Brockett. He worked in the film industry. And after Brockett took Morris, the rest was history. And Morris was a Hollywood star.
Wow.
Morris, the movie star, alive and well.
So since the 1970s, he's been a movie star?
Yes.
He's been a movie star like pretty much as long as Harrison Ford.
Yes. Literally, like 50-year anniversary of his career is next year.
The eye thing was fake, right? He has 2 eyes.
I believe so. It's the Hollywood movie magic.
That was CGI, or perhaps I doubt they did a prosthetic on him, but maybe they did. Maybe they got in there and put some makeup on him.
Can you believe alligators live to 70?
No, I genuinely didn't know. I would have said 30.
So they were going to do him for Happy Gilmore 2, but apparently he's just too old to travel. You know how it goes.
Well, he's probably too expensive. I'm sure his rider is probably ridiculous at this point.
Oh my God.
I'm reading right now about the oldest alligators. Alligators can live like around 70 years. Apparently, like one of the oldest alligators right now in the world, according to Swamp Fever Airboat Adventures. This might be what's his name's Airboat Adventure.
Lana Del Rey's husband. Andrew Dufresne.
I think it might be. Holy shit! Hold on, is it? I don't know. Anyway, he says this article says
Jeremy Dufresne, I think, not Andrew.
Muja, the oldest living alligator, is 83 years old. He's been living in the Belgrade Zoo since 1937. He's the most senior resident. He is a World War II survivor. The zoo was bombed and suffered a catastrophic damage during the war, and he was the only one that survived. This guy has seen some shit since the Cloyce box of fucking alligators.
So he went on to start a very successful bank in the Midwest, and he played baseball as well.
So I have an idea, guys.
Billionaire.
I have an idea.
Invented the stapler. Yeah.
Invented the question mark.
Invented the jump shot.
I have an idea. I think we should do a Colorado road tour. And we should do a live pod on Red Rocks.
Mike the Headless Chicken.
Mike the Chicken. Yeah, Headless Chicken Festival.
We should Mike the Headless Chicken. We see the alligator from Happy Gilmore, and we do a show from Red Rocks, but we don't book it. We just show up to Red Rocks to do a show.
This is great. I'm so into this. You have one eye.
You got one eye.
He snaps at him. Give me the ball.
He looks at his hand. Chugs, you took his hand. DK and I were dying on Sunday night after the pod.
Oh my God.
We discover a new Happy Gilmore line every week. You got one eye.
Oh my God. Dude, that's great.
Thank you everyone for emailing us at ringoffantasyfootball@gmail.com. We don't have a Friday show, but and again, Ring NFL Draft Show, we do the whole offseason, we do the playoffs, we do everything. So please stick with us if it's your first season. We really appreciate everyone just listening for the show. And if it's your first year, we crush the offseason, trades, free agency, coach firings and hirings and everything. We have really fun stuff planned for Black Monday. And stick with us. Thank you, DK. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Austin. Thank you to Morris, the movie star. Thank you to everyone who emailed in about Morris, the movie star, the alligator. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you. Aerosmith?
Nice.
Have I said Aerosmith? Can't remember.
If you have, it's been years.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay. Kind of one of those all-time bands, right?
Yeah. Steven Tyler, speaking of old alligators. This guy is leathery. How old is Steven Tyler at this point? Could I win my rec league with Steven Tyler on my team?
He's tall. He's got like the Joey Porter Jr. arms. You know, this thing's
is he
long.
tall? I always guess these guys are tiny.
He's just skinny.
So thin that he's 5'10".
Yeah,
but he's so thin. He looks like he's tall.
It is rare to find a movie star and or musician that's tall. Except
Why is
Hosier. That guy's big.
Hosier's big. Hosier's great.
6'5". Yeah.
Steven Tyler. He's had a career. What a life.
Yeah.
76 years old?
And a famous daughter.
Who's his daughter?
Liv Tyler.
Liv Tyler from Armageddon.
Oh, wait, no. Do I know her?
She's also from
yes.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh my God.
was,
did I tell you guys that Jackie's watching
Arwen.
Lord of the Rings for the first time?
She's
it's
never
really
seen
weird.
Lord of the Rings?
No, we're doing it for the first time. And it's great.
Oh, hell yeah. Film it. Film
the
the
whole
reactions.
thing.
Yeah.
Heifetz, do you feel that when you watch it for the first time, you need to do the extended versions, or do you just watch the originals?
So we were at her brother's house, and her brother was like, fuck it, we're doing the extended version for the first one. I couldn't believe how much movie there was.
How long is the extended?
Oh my God.
It's not 4 hours, right?
It's like
good.
3 plus.
So the second movie is just 3 hours, like without the extended edition. I think it's 3 hours, the second one. The first one was over 3, I think. I mean, what I think of is the beginning of the movie, DK, where they have the Fellowship of the Ring, is 90 minutes into the extended movie. I thought that was the beginning. Like,
Yeah,
it was
no, in the
halfway through a
extended
3-hour
version,
movie.
the Fellowship happens right before the intermission.
Oh my, I couldn't believe it. It's
Those are just gratuitous, like time in the Shire. If you take out all the stuff with Gollum and them like going into Mordor and stuff, which is, I think, perfectly fine to do. Just skip those parts. Then it's like doable. Then it's palatable. I love those movies, for the record. I just,
but this is the best time of year
after
to
watching
do
it once, I'm like, I don't need to watch these Gollum scenes anymore.
Craig,
like
have
a
you ever
fake
watched
fan.
Lord of the Rings?
I've seen, I actually have seen the first one, but I watched it on the grainy television like 6 years ago, and I remember nothing. And I actually remember seeing the little hut that one of them lived in, and I thought it looked kind of cheesy, and I was like, eh.
The little hut was cheesy.
Talk about a hobbit hole?
Yeah, I was like, I don't know about this.
Peter Jackson had like
this little set.
3,000 real chain link armor suits made, and Craig's like, I don't know.
You can go to the Hobbit. You can go to Hobbiton or whatever. The
Is it
Shire.
New Zealand? Where they shoot New Zealand?
Yeah.
Whatever. The set inside his little Hobbit hut.
I think it looks cozy. I want a fucking Hobbit hut.
Yeah, it looks pretty sick.
And it's not called a Hobbit hut, for the record.
It's not called a Hobbit hut. They came up with something better than that.
It's a Hobbit hole.
Oh,
yeah.
So sorry.
Christ, DK.
They
don't call.
I would love to explore a Hobbit hole.
Look, I'm not writing off those movies at all. I'm sure they're awesome, and I will watch them at some point, and I respect them, even though I haven't seen them.
I respect their making. It's like Sting. I don't really listen to his music, but
shouts out Peter Jackson, the whole gang, Bilbo, Gollum.
Are they making? Is Peter Jackson
guy.
done? Is he done? What's he doing these days? Is he making movies?
Crazy, the World War I movie where they were like, "You're the only person in the world who can make this."
And they shall not grow old.
Do you guys watch the television show The Rings of Power on Amazon?
Do you know what's funny? I actually have seen a couple of it involuntarily, because sometimes on Thursday nights after Thursday football, I just don't turn Peacock off, and it just, if I don't touch the television, it just becomes the Lords of Power. Last year, that for me, that was Yellowstone.
Peacock? I thought, no, it's on Amazon.
Oh yeah, Prime. Sorry, yeah, Prime.
Yeah.
Prime. You could explain this better than me, but somehow on Prime, now I'm getting all confused because Peacock has Yellowstone, but it's a CBS show. I don't know how, but last year, if I didn't turn off Monday Night Football or Thursday Night Football, it became Yellowstone. And this year, if you don't turn off Thursday Night Football, it eventually becomes the Rings of Power. And I was kind of like, this is dumb.
Yeah.
And I look up and I'm like, oh,
There's a very complicated deal that was made years ago that basically gave NBC the archive of Yellowstone and gave NBC the new seasons of Yellowstone and Paramount the past seasons of Yellowstone. So you actually have to have both if you want to be able to watch the current season and the old seasons, which is crazy. Also, Amazon inflated the fucking Red One, The Rock Christmas movie numbers because they had, it used
just
to be
automatically played afterwards.
Yes. They just had it come on right after Thursday Night Football, and it boosted a lot of ratings. It's like, they do that for the regular Super Bowl, where they just like whatever the show after the Super Bowl is has massive ratings.
One day, Craig, I want to hear how ratings work. I have questions.
I don't know why you are so confused about it, but we could get Matt Bellamy on. Maybe we could ask him. He could answer better than I could
about ratings. I just am confused, but I don't know if anyone cares.
Aerosmith, Dream On.
A foot shorter than Larry Bird, Steve Tyler is.
Larry Bird, hit me up if you want to run fives.
Do you think he still plays?
No.
His back.
Hard to get that
yeah,
up.
his back
Dude,
was fucked 30 years
He
ago.
retired 30 years ago because his back didn't work.
But
So
he works at an NBA
Yeah,
facility.
but playing in an NBA season is different than like hooping around with your
That's he
friends.
works at a
Correct, but
building
it has
that has
been-
courts.
It has been 30 years since he couldn't had
How-
to stop playing basketball because his back hurt.
How old was Clint Eastwood when he stopped playing basketball?
You know, I watched his newest movie, Juror Number 2. Have you guys seen it?
Clint Eastwood was 70
What is
years
it
old
called?
when he stopped playing basketball.
Juror Number 2.
All I know about Clint Eastwood is he would talk to that chair like that was like 12 years ago. He talked to a chair for like 5 minutes.
He was 86 at that point.
Dude, he basically made a movie in the 90s that was like, my career's over. This is my swan song. And now he's been directing movies for 30
That's
more
when you
years.
guys were born.
He did Unforgiven, and it was like, this is kind of the encapsulation of every Western I've ever done, and I'm going to kind of go against the genre and do a lot of new stuff as like a final thing. And now he's directed, I don't know, 15 more movies in the last 30 years, including Juror Number 2.
He was so old and Unforgiven, too.
Yeah, that's the whole point. It's like, wow, he's old. He directed a movie this year. It came out 2 months ago. He's 94 years old.
I love it.
He's 94 and
Is
he
it
directed
good?
a movie. I think it's bizarre that people think this movie is so good because I think it's bad. I think it is one of the best legal courtroom premises ever for a movie.
What is it?
What is it? Give me like the elevators, whatever pitch.
A guy gets called into jury duty for a murder, for a homicide. And he finds out in the middle of the trial that he actually thinks he is responsible for the murder.
Oh, that's
He
sick.
didn't know?
No.
Interesting.
He
Is he like
basically
blackout drunk or
He basically, no, it was raining and windy and dark one night, and he thought he hit a deer, and he never thought about it again. And it's been a year, and he got called for jury duty, and he realized, oh, holy shit, I might have actually hit a woman who was drunk walking home, and I didn't realize it, and hit her off the side of the road. And this other guy on trial, her boyfriend, is now going to go to jail for life.
that is a really good premise for a movie.
Amazing premise. And even the lead actors are good, but the deliberation scenes literally are a Lifetime movie. And it is some of the worst acting I've seen in a film in a long time by the non-leads. It takes you out so much.
That's so funny. Love it.
But it's on Max. Give it a shot. Great premise.
After all that, I don't think I'll watch it, Craig.
It's a good premise. I don't know. It's a discussion movie. It's one of those like, what would you do?
93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I know. I actually don't understand it. I don't know.
I was trying to get my dad to Max, and he's like, "I'm clicking on Max. Why doesn't it work?" And I'm like, "What is it?" He says, "Say on your TV," and it's like it says HBO Max, and it says service error, and I'm like,
They
"No,
really
no,
fucked
Dad.
that up.
Yeah, it's not HBO Max. You need a different app." And he's like, "But this is HBO Max." I'm like, "No, now it's Max, but you need a different one. It's not that anymore." And I'm like, "You know what? You're not going to watch that show. I'm not."
I don't know.
explaining this to you."
You're not getting the Penguin. I
You're
don't
not
know why
getting the
they
Penguin.
couldn't just turn the HBO Max app into Max. It sucks that you had to delete it and download a new one. Everybody in the world had that problem of like,
I was like, anytime you have to do like extra steps, it's like, this isn't going to go well.
yeah, it's
He's
I
like,
don't-
"Why'd they take the HBO off?" I'm like, I couldn't tell you, man. Anyway, goodbye, everyone. Dad, I'll fix it for you eventually.